Hi, I'm Arati. Last week I showed you my acrylic inks and the ways in which I use them to paint. And today I'm going to show you some more ways that I use them to make collage papers. I'll also show you some of the work that I've made with collage papers in my sketchbook, going all the way up to last night. And I'll show you exactly how I use them during the session. I like to use acrylic paint for collage papers because it is waterproof once dry and it doesn't move when I put my matte medium or cocoina glue while I'm working, and the color doesn't spread all over the place, except of course for Liquitex, which I'll come to in a minute. The main types of paper that I use to make collage papers are some recycled printer paper. This is kind of thin, it's 90-gram paper, and because it's recycled, it's slightly off-white. I also use regular printer paper, which is white. It's the same thickness as this paper, but it's pure white as opposed to this off-white color. And I also have been using some deli paper. This is kind of translucent and it comes in a box like this of usually 500 sheets. This is available in different brands all over the place at Jackson's Art and so on. Occasionally I will use tracing paper or even tissue paper, but I'm not using that in this particular session. In order to make these papers, I do a variety of things. First of all, I just use plain acrylic ink to make textured papers. Don't forget to protect your surface. Inks can get messy and stain your surface as well. Because I want to go all the way to the edge of the paper, I've popped some scrap paper underneath my sheets. I don't want the color to be completely flat, so I pop some acrylic ink on the paper and I use a thick brush to spread it around in different shapes and waves and just creating a little bit of texture on the paper because I don't want a completely flat paper. I was making these papers to use them in last night's session, which involved diggers on the beach with Sarah Dyer in her Patreon. And I would need a lot of browns, beiges for sand, and orange for diggers. So that's the color palette that I'm kind of going for. The other thing I do sometimes is add a diluted layer of ink and then add another color on top to create more of a texture. I do like to use the same range of colors when I'm painting papers in a particular session because it feels cohesive when I'm then using them. So if one paper's got a bit of orange and green and another paper has a bit of green and blue, those two connect together with the green and it doesn't just look like a disparate bunch of papers that I've just chucked together. I also mix my colors together for more variation. Objects are rarely just a single flat color, as you'll see when I show you my sketchbook later. And this helps to create 3D effects with only one piece of paper. Acrylic paint pens are another method that I use to make papers. I create patterns with them, polka dots, stripes, checks, all sorts, and then I paint over them to kind of dull the lines, or sometimes I might keep them with plain white background, although I prefer the colored paper rather than having that plain white background. Acrylic markers are also useful to create other types of patterns like dots or hatching or squiggly lines in contrasting colors on top of my dry papers. Once the acrylic paint is dry, then you can do these effects. Don't use markers on top of wet paint because your markers will die. They will just get clogged up and you'll have to clean them for quite a while, or maybe they're not recoverable at all. I also make papers that have more texture, either with a brush, you can use a sponge, you can just wipe away ink with a cloth, you can do all sorts of things, whatever you can think of. You can use bubble wrap to create textures on it. These are useful for trees, grass, waves, anything else that has a little bit of texture, clothes even, and it gives a bit of movement as well. Deli paper is more transparent, so you can create patterns on it that will show whatever paper you layer under it as well. So if you layer a translucent blue paper on top of a yellow, it'll give you a greenish effect. It's not as transparent as tracing paper, or I think medical paper as well just becomes completely transparent. This is translucent, so you will see the paper still. I also like to create texture by painting a surface and then rubbing the deli paper over it. And then the deli paper doesn't pick up all of the ink, but it creates this lovely texture that comes in really handy for things like rocks or concrete or beaches, for example. I create a variety of patterns, all abstract. If I want to create something that is very specific during my collage session, I can just cut out a piece and then draw on top of it and create that. I also add some gradients because you never know when you need shades of the same color in a collage. Like if you're creating, let's say, a bird that's pink, not all parts of the bird are the same pink, so you might need a lighter pink and a darker pink. Create a little bit of dimension to that shape. You could cut out individual feathers and stick them down. It's a lot of hard work, but it really pays off in the end. I haven't done that yet, but I might do. Or like if you're creating a flower, and then you can use this kind of paper for petals, and it'll give you a really nice variation. I'm quite rough with creating these papers. I mean, you can always make a new color of paper as you're working, as you need it, but I like to have a variety of papers like this with a bunch of textures on them because it just makes for a more interesting collage. Once the papers are dry, here's how they turn out. A good variety of paper textures and colors that I think will come in very handy in my next sessions. These very much depend on what I'm feeling like on the day and where my work is currently going. Last weekend, I actually filmed a sketchbook analysis of my own work in Zoom sessions over the last 6 months. And that's free to watch now on my Patreon with a bunch of questions to ask yourself about your own work. So if you want to go and analyze your own work to see what you need to take forward, go and watch that. It's free on my Patreon. Linked for you up in the cards and down in the description box below. I also have a whole tub of collage papers, newspaper, and other things like catalogs that I kind of dip into when I need them. The first time I tried collage in my work at all, I think for the first time perhaps since university, was this session with Odd Orange. All I had with me was this little booklet of printed papers that I got from Choosing Keeping. It's got all sorts of prints, florals, geometrics, a whole bunch of things. You can see here that I've cut out a little bit. But I didn't at that time have any of my painted papers. So in this session, I half drew, half collaged. So all of the clothes in this session about costumes were made with collage papers, but I did also add a little bit of shading on top in order to create a little bit more dimension. So you can see here, I've added pencil over the top in this section, and then I've added a whole bunch of drawing to make it make more sense. So this little booklet came in really handy, and I have used it since then, but not as much since I started making my own collage papers. But this is a good place to start if you have origami papers or if you have magazines or catalogs or things that you can cut out of. You can start there. It was a really fun session, and as I progressed from simpler shapes to more complex shapes where I'm using 2 or 3 different kinds of patterns within the same drawing to create a little bit more texture and more interest. Again, there's shading with pencil to create dimension also. This last one, I added fluff and feathers with pencil. And then I skipped a couple of sessions and came back to an Odd Orange session where it was drawing at the museum, where I started to combine more painting with collage. So a bunch of these things are collage, like the statue in front is collage, the man is collage, the people are collage, but then this is drawn at the back. And then the statues are collage again, and then this is drawn. So it's a combination of both, and I really love the painterliness of this. Unless you actually feel it, you can't really tell there's collage in here. Maybe with some of the more geometric shapes you could, but then I've drawn on top of collage pieces as well. So I really enjoyed this session. And then the next drawing in this session as well, I combined a whole bunch of references for this. There's half drawing, half collage, a little bit of drawing over the collage. Really, really interesting. So all of this is collage in the back. And then you can see the pattern coming in here along with my own made collage papers. I skipped another couple of sessions after that. I will show you these in a separate sketchbook tour, but this one is just focused on the collage bits in the sketchbook. This was another Odd Orange session. I feel like it's a little bit stiff. Boats are not my favorite subject, so they weren't as dynamic as I felt they could be. And also, this was 6 minutes. I mean, how much collage can you really do in 6 minutes? Because you got to choose the paper, figure out what shape you're going to cut, glue it down, and then draw over it. So yeah, not a lot of time. I do like this one, how I did the reflection. Maybe it would have been nice to have a transparent piece of tissue paper or something over the top of this to create that like water effect. And I was quite happy with this and the dynamism of this. But I felt it was a little bit stiff and I wasn't quite happy with the way that things had turned out. So I don't think I did collage for a while in this sketchbook, but I did do this page. This is the Nova Trio sketchbook tour a couple of videos ago of fish. And the feeling of happiness and excitement kind of came back with this because they were irregular shapes. I realized that I didn't like the geometric shapes of this. It didn't feel right for collage, but I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the color, I enjoyed the pattern, I enjoyed drawing over it with markers as well, which I wasn't able to do as much in this session just because of the timings of the pieces. But this was great fun, but that's the only piece of collage I did in that sketchbook. Skipped a whole bunch of sessions and came back in December of last year. So there's a whole 6 months between this fish page and these, what my husband calls creepy reindeers. I really enjoyed them, but he just thinks they're extremely creepy. and these ones were even creepier. Maybe it's the way I did the eyes, I'm not sure. But how can you say Rudolph and the little rabbit are not cute, right? They're not creepy to me. I just think they're great. They're great fun. Then I skipped a session and I came back to this where I created maybe one of my all-time favorite collage pictures. This is obviously mixed media, so there's collage in the gifts and everything else is drawn. And then the skirt is Neocolor. I love how this floofy tissue tulle skirt came out. But here you can see what I mean by the texture of the paper creating 3 dimensions. So all I had to do was draw these 3 lines in order to make this gift look 3D. Now, if I didn't have that, this would look quite flat, and I would have had to add more color on the bottom in order to create some form of dimension. Really loved this as well, and I really like the half drawn, half collaged feel of the whole thing. These pages were perhaps not as successful in the same session, but I learned a lot nonetheless, and I really like the fact that I've drawn half of it and collaged part of it. I drew by hand for a session of life drawing and came back to the collage for Emma Carlisle's New Year's Eve session. We're drawing winter scenes and winter animals. And this page is okay. It's a little bit clunky, but this page I really love. And here you can see what I mean by the texture helping with the animals. It just creates a little bit of variation in the rabbits, so I don't have to actually draw over them to get that feeling of fur or light and shade and things like that. The next session was also with Emma Carlisle. It was during that entire New Year's Eve session, and we did quick thumbnails of landscapes and then chose one to then do for a longer period of time, and that created another of my absolute favorite collages. Just look at the way I've managed to get texture in it. I have used some white paint here, but all of this is paper. All of this is paper, all the textures. So you can see why the variation, like this really looks like an island instead of just being flat. It has texture and dimension, and I can use different colors for different things. It's really one of my favorite pages, and I am taking this forward into my work presently in terms of landscapes and dogs in landscapes. The dog wasn't there, that's my addition, but you know what I mean. Then there was another session with Emma Carlisle that same week. Still life. This wasn't as successful to me. I do like the more minimalist ones, where all I was doing was cutting out shapes and kind of leaving a lot of negative space. But these ones just got very complicated and I didn't have as much time. This was like 10 minutes. You can't really do that much collage in 10 minutes, in my opinion, in this size. Maybe if I had gone bigger, it would have been better. It put me off collage for a little bit because I was just really tired and dissatisfied with this session. So I skipped a whole bunch of sessions until last night. So that was January of this year, and we're now in July. So I skipped it for another 6 months of no collage work and came back to this. I am so pleased with this. These are the papers that I made earlier in this video. You can see the oranges, the browns, the blues, and I've also used a little bit of marker here. So I haven't filmed many of my sessions except the fish session, which is on my Patreon, and this one last night, which is also now on my Patreon. Available to watch to see exactly how I made this piece. Now, my technique is pretty simple. I do start with a little pencil drawing just to make sure I know where the first shape is going. I don't draw anything after that. I just cut out pieces and stick them together. But I started with this particular digger, and also because I'd not drawn diggers before, so I needed to like figure out the shape, and then added some more textures here, added these groins, Groynes. They're seaside things. You can look them up if you like. And then added a little bit of texture at the bottom, which you can't really see now that I've gone over it with the other things. Then the next reference was this digger, so I added that. Added the human. It's all little pieces of paper just creating the entire feel of it. For the sea, I'd used a piece of collage paper, but I particularly used Liquitex in this session to show you exactly what happens with Liquitex. So as I was applying the matte medium here to stick the paper down, the Liquitex was starting to run its color, which doesn't happen with any of the other papers, just the Liquitex. Even though it's dry, it's not permanent when dry. I'm not quite sure why that is. So to cover that, I added a little bit of blue with my Staedtler Pigment Arts marker. I must say those were gifted to me by the brand. Very thankful for that. And then I added these textured papers over the top. This was the deli paper so that I could get some cloud cover, even though that wasn't there in the original references. And then we came back to this man and added him, and I added some marker to add the grill behind him. So I also added marker for the ground here, and I also added marker on top of the groins in order to make them stand out more against the digger. So it's a combination of collage and mixed media in order to create the entire piece. And this is how I will be working now in the future. I also really love the foreground, middle ground, background, and far background to create a little bit more space in my work, to feel like you're going into the picture a little bit. Now that you've seen how I make my collage papers and make my collage work, I hope you'll be encouraged to try it. You can make collage papers with any ink, but I prefer waterproof ink so that it doesn't then move when I'm sticking it down. Thank you so much for watching. You can sign up to my free email list, my free Patreon, or you can subscribe to this channel to be notified whenever a new video comes up. YouTube thinks you'll like this video next. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!